Welcome, everybody, to the Sheridan Report on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The Sheridan Report is brought to you by Seat Giant. Make sure you use the promo code TGT at Seat Giant. And also the Handicapping Guide. Make sure you check them out by going halfway down on the right-hand side on the Grueling Truth page and clicking the button. I am your co-host for the Sheridan Report, Mike Goodpaster. And right now I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Bobby Sheridan. How you doing, Bobby?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing great. I'm really happy with baseball's response to the last 3 or 4 days. Finally got some consistency, and now let's keep it for a long time. That's the plan.
Because baseball, as a great man, wise man once said, is now driving the bus, Bobby. So, where are we driving that bus today?
Hey, Mike, we're driving it for 3 straight 3-team mix-and-match parlays, so we'll start out there, okay? What we've got there today is, and I'm pulling it up right now as we speak, we've got, let me give them to you, then I'll talk a little bit about them. We got the Mets at 420, the Cardinals at 515, and the Yankees at 410. So first the Mets, that's DeGrom. This would be the lowest favorite, the most value of the 3 that I just gave you. That's $1.20. Well, why? Because it's at Atlanta. Atlanta's a great team. Atlanta's winning that division with a big run that they've put in. But today, Mike, Jacob deGrom gets an opportunity to right the ship and win a big game within the division. And even in the great big world of professional baseball, the divisional games are way more meaningful and are way more, I wouldn't say more motivation for a guy like Jacob deGrom, but just, hey, he knows that he's the ace and he needs to get this win today. I think he'll pitch well. And Teheran can throw in some good ones, throw in some bad ones, a little bit inconsistent. I like him better on the road. Let's take the Mets at home. And if we get, on the road, the small favorite, if we get that one, we got a big shot in this one because the Cardinals are over $2 with Flaherty on the mound against a lower-tiered Marlins starter. So I think we can definitely win that first 6 innings and hang on at home. And then the last one would be the Yankees, and this is the big series with the Rays, the American League East leaders. The Yankees, J.A. Happ, we bet against him last time and got lucky to get the win. He actually pitched pretty well in that game, and I expected him to, but we still got that win. We're going to go on him today. He's been the most consistent pitcher for the Yankees, and that's what they need today. They need a big start out of him. They're going to beat an opener, Ryan Stanek, and they're $1.50 at home, and I think they own both pitching matchups, both the starting and the relieving. And the Yankees, as we know, can hit the long ball at home. So big shot to win this so we can get the Mets in, and this will make it 3 in a row. And that parlay was paying interesting. Mondays each paid $363 for 100 in the overnight, and wound up paying a little more when it went off. Last night's overnight paid $364, which is today's. Last night's when I put it in. And now has gone down to paying only $336, and that's basically because the Cardinals have jumped up a little bit to $230 now, and the Yankees have jumped up from $140 to $150, so that number came down. So there is your 3-teamer, Mike, going for 3 in a row. All right, now we got 3 straight plays. Yes, we got 3 straight plays. I'm going to talk about 2 of them, okay? One of them is your Reds, Mike. We had them a couple days ago at Great American Ballpark when they got through their weather and were able to play that game, and they got the win. And, Mike, they're coming back today, and they're facing Justin Verlander. But, a couple of things. You got to look at some changing landscapes. Verlander is a great pitcher, and he's one of the best in the game. He's a future Hall of Famer. But that started in Seattle when I thought, it's about time that he has a few starts that aren't, 8 innings, no runs, 9 innings, 1 run, and 8 innings, 1 run. And he had put together such a long run. There comes a point in the season where things do flatten out a bit, and if you can guess right, you can get some big numbers. And we got unlucky 2 games ago because he threw up a bit of a clunker for him at Seattle, and we didn't get the win. He took that into 12 innings, did everything we could to beat him and be in position, and didn't get the win. That hurt us. But we came back his last start. He got the L, and I'm looking up where that was. That was against Milwaukee. Again, we're talking 7 innings, 3 runs. Okay, Verlander. Seattle, 6 innings, 3 runs. So that's 13 innings, 6 earned. That's not a 1 ERA, right? Even though his other numbers are great. He doesn't walk anybody. He gets a lot of strikeouts. He's a tough guy to deal with. But still, 6 runs, 13 innings. How about Anthony DeSclafani of the Reds today? Last 3 outings since batting practice supposedly was being taken against him in Chicago when I tweeted about their announcer. Well, 16 in the third, 5 earned runs. So, hey, he's getting the job done. The Reds have won 3 straight starts he's pitched. Why not take $1.60 at home? So I like the Reds as a valued home underdog plus $1.63. And then, but Mike, my best play tonight is happening in Texas, and that is the Texas Rangers at plus $1.04. I think this line is completely wrong. Indians are minus 114. Texas plus $1.04. Texas has a great home field. I want to say something like 40, I don't know, what is it, 25-12 in 40 games, 37 games, something like that. One of the best home records in all of baseball. How about a guy, Sampson, pitching today, who is 4-1 with something like a 2 ERA at home? So we have a lot of home cooking working today. How about the Rangers trying to be 8 over 500, which would be a high water mark for them? And how about Sampson going for, I think it would be maybe 5 wins and 6 decisions, overall. So this is a team that's got a lot of good things working for it. Offensively, they're doing well, and I think this line is completely flipped. Cleveland with Plesac. Remember we said it was Dan Plesac's nephew. His first 2 outings, 7 innings, 1 run, 7 innings, 2 runs. But the Reds touched him for 4 and 5 innings, and what's he really proven? To be a road favorite against a team that's 25-12 this year at home. So I like the line. I like Texas. I think this is a great spot for them. So that's 2 of our 3 straights. I'll hold the other one back for just subscribers, and let's have a great baseball day again. We're 16-7 the last 3, so let's keep it going.
Yeah, and if you want to subscribe, you can go to the SheridanReport.com on the internet. For $10 a day, you get the complete report. $5 a day, you get the top play today, and for $50 a month, you get everything. All right, Bobby, where do you want to go on this day?
Mike, we had 4 honest days, and I love when you talk boxing. And I had no idea, though, when you told me that this was one of the top 20 fights of all time. So I said, oh, man, this is going to be great. 1941, Joe Louis KOs Billy Conn in 13 for the heavyweight title.
All right, yeah, 1941, I think there was 2 sure things, just like there are today, death and taxes. And I think there was a third thing for American sports fans, and that was Joe Louis will win his next fight, and the one after that, and the one after that. Of course, Joe became the heavyweight champion when he beat the Cinderella Man, James J. Braddock, in 1937. He had the epic knockout over Max Schmeling. And coming into this fight, he had defended his title 17 times, 15 of those wins inside the distance. He possessed an air of invincibility. He had such skill, power, deadly accurate punchers, and he was just devastating. And they came up and started calling his opponents the Bum in a Month Club. But this isn't today where you're only fighting once or twice a year. He'd fight and defend his title 4, 5, 6 times a year, and you kind of run out of opponents after a while. Now, in 1938 and 39, he was proclaimed the Fighter of the Year by Ring Magazine. Something changed in 1940. In 1940, he did not get that distinction. It went to light heavyweight champion of the world, Billy Conn, who was from Pittsburgh, and he received it after his first full year as campaigning as a heavyweight. He scored big wins over Bob Foster, who Joe Louis had beat a couple times, Al McCoy, who Louis had beat, Lisa Vold, who Louis had beat, and this did little to make Conn a serious threat to Louis. But it did solidify kind of the general perception that out of all of the no-hopers, that this Irish-American from Pittsburgh had at least a modicum of hope. Now, Lewis was one of the most well-schooled boxers of all time. His trainer was Jack Blackburn, and he had great technique and crushing power that allowed him to dominate people. So, Lewis Conn was the classic matchup. You had the power puncher versus the clever boxer, the bull versus the matador, and the profile of both men made this fight irresistible. Um, Even if very few people gave Conn even a slim chance. Now, almost 60,000 people gathered this June night, the largest crowd in the history of the old Polo Grounds. You're a baseball man, so you know about the Polo Grounds. And it was the largest crowd to gather for a fight since the famous Luis Angel Firpo and Jack Dempsey to brawl in 1923, which Dempsey won in 2 rounds. And from reading about this fight when I was younger, I know the atmosphere was positively electric. There was curiosity and anticipation because many sensed that maybe, just maybe, Lewis finally would have a real challenge. Not that he would lose, but he would have a real fight. And that made this an alluring, high-caliber matchup, a clash of 2 dominant and popular champions, one African-American, one white. This is set a few months, 5 or 6 months before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And you got to remember, Joe Louis was loved by a lot of white people, too, because of the win over Max Schmeling. Plus, he was the opposite of Jack Johnson, because Jack Johnson was the guy going out there dating white women, basically thumbing his nose at everybody. And when you look at it, I mean, Joe Louis was the opposite. He was married to a African-American woman. He basically did what he was told. And I know some African-Americans even to this day have some problems with that. But the early going in this fight, and I'm going to post this eventually on our website because I've got the complete fight. And it looked bad for Conn early in the fight. Lewis had a 25-pound weight advantage, and Lewis kind of set the pace of the fight, stalked him, landed shots to Conn's belly, ribs, and he staggered him with a pair of rights in round 2. But round 3 started a different story. And, Conn started to use his jab. It started to find his target. And he wasted no time in bringing behind it some sharp hooks and right hands. And the thing about him was Joe had quick feet and he had a big punch, but he didn't move laterally real well. So Conn used constantly shifting and moving as he worked. He landed a hard right near the end of the 3rd round and immediately followed up with a sharp 1-2 that forced Lewis to do something no one had seen him do since Max Schmeling had upset him in 1936 in their first fight. He actually had to hang on to clear his head. That was the first time in 5 years that he'd been in trouble. You go forward to round 4, the crowd, from what I read, very astonished because they saw an extremely rare sight. Joe's knees actually buckled after Conn struck him with 2 rights. The challenger followed up, clubbing Lewis with both fists, forcing him to retreat. And after 4 rounds, boxing fans knew their hopes had been filled. The great Joe Louis was at a seriously competitive battle that was going to test him more than any of his previous title defenses. And the next round, everything shifts dramatically, as it does in most great fights. And that's what made this fight so great, because one round, it looks like Conn's going to pull the upset. And in the other round, next round, Joe Louis will adjust something because he was a great fighter. They're both 2 of the greats in boxing history, and they kind of went back and forth. And the thing that really hurt Lewis was just the constant moving that the challenger did. And he seemed to always be one step ahead of Lewis. It seemed almost like Lewis was bewildered by the Pittsburgh Kid, which was what Billy Conn's nickname was. And he just swarmed Lewis, quick hands, striking repeatedly, hitting Joe with lefts, rights. And by the time you get to the 8th or 9th round, Billy Conn had control of this fight. And at the end of, I think it was round 8 or 9, Conn told Lewis, "Joe, you're in a real fight tonight." And the champion looked at him and replied, "I know it," before turning to the safety of his corner. But the thing that made Joe Louis one of the 2 greatest heavyweights of all time was his ability to rise to a challenge like this. Just like when he was younger and he got beat by Max Schmeling, and he comes back 2 years later, and literally he almost killed Max Schmeling. He put him in the hospital for a month because, as great fighters do, he was able to rebound from a bad effort. And Joe was a firm believer in Sam Langford, the old great heavyweight, actually lightweight through heavyweight boxer. Sam Langford's old axiom, kill the body and the head will die. And he started to put tremendous pressure on the courageous Conn. And, Conn was a lot smaller, and he wasn't winning rounds, but he was inflicting a fair amount of damage. And Conn comes back in the 11th round using great footwork again. He avoids Lewis's toughest punches. Now, this is back in the day where, the heavyweight championship of the world is contested over 15 rounds. And in world title fights in 1941, they're all 15. So if this had been a 12-round fight, Billy Conn would have scored one of the greatest, maybe the greatest upset in boxing history by taking a close decision and winning the heavyweight championship. Because everybody, by the time you get to the 12th round, has the sense that this fight belongs to Conn. And not only was he ahead on points, but he had badly shaken Lewis in the late going. He had dictated the terms of the fight, and all he had to do was stay at a safe distance, continue to box smartly, and Billy Conn was going to be the heavyweight champion of the world. And this is, we talk about Tyson Douglas. Mike Tyson was looked at like Joe Louis was at that time. He was looked at as unbeatable. And Billy Conn was a light heavyweight. There'd never been a light heavyweight champion to beat a heavyweight champion. And this is the thing. This was such a great feat that it would be 44 more years before a light heavyweight champion, Michael Spinks, would beat a reigning heavyweight champion when he beat Larry Holmes in September of 1985. So this is something that in the 100 years that they've really covered by from heavyweight champions. The first lineal heavyweight champion was 1885. It took 100 years for a light heavyweight champion to beat a heavyweight champion. And Billy Conn almost cut that time in half, basically. But the problem was, Conn was a guy that, got greedy. He had to fight one. As some would say, he was too Irish. And he comes out, and he actually tried to knock Joe Louis out. And a heavy right in the 13 from Louis staggered Conn, forced him to hold on. And it was obvious to the 60,000 people in attendance, and even the people listening worldwide on the radio, that Billy Conn was in dire trouble. Louis doggedly pursued him, and what followed was, for lack of a better term, a methodical battering. Flush rights, uppercuts, all took their toll before a vicious right to the body rendered Conn virtually helpless. All of his technical wizardry was gone because of the brutality of Joe Louis. And finally, you get a final finishing volley, amazingly accurate power punches that decided the battle, and the fight ends with Billy Conn face down, wondering what could have been. And the thing is, they fought 4 years later, but Billy Conn was 4 years older. They'd both been in the war, and Joe Louis knew what to expect this time. He knocked him out in the 8th round. But that's why Joe Louis versus Billy Conn on this day, June 18th, 1941, was one of the biggest sporting moments of the first half century in the United States.
Well, Mike, I had no idea that it had that kind of relevance in terms of, history. Like you compare, the Spinks, it took until 1985, so another 60, 60-something years. And I had no idea the type of upset this would have been at that time and how close he came to getting it. And it's just amazing. And would he have known that he was up? Could he have?
No, but he knew. Everybody, the 60,000 people knew he was up because he'd won the first 13 rounds. He had clearly won at least, or the first 12 rounds, he'd won clearly at least from what I've seen at a fight, probably 7 or 8 rounds. And all he had to do, and this is the thing, Joe Louis even thought that he was about to lose the fight.
Yeah. But, with that said, great.
Yeah, and let's give it to Lucas Weiss. On the Waterfront, starring Marlon Brando, you could have been another Billy Conn. I could have been a contender. But the other thing that was interesting here was Lewis didn't take him too seriously, because the other thing Joe Lewis did was he got his weight all the way down to 198, 200 pounds, because he didn't want to look like a big giant getting ready to fight Billy Conn, because once he beats him, everybody would have said, well, you beat a little guy. But I think Conn weighed into this fight 175, 176, which was a light heavyweight limit, so he didn't really even put that much weight on. He might have been 180 at tops. So Joe Lewis, I don't think, really took this seriously. And I think the only person that really thought Billy Conn had a chance was Billy Conn. But in the end, the only person that really needs to think you have a chance at anything in life is yourself. It doesn't really matter what outside forces believe. We saw that with Buster Douglas. We saw that with Andy Ruiz. Hell, we give it to Lucas. The Toronto Raptors. Outside of the Toronto Raptors, I don't think anybody really thought they would win. But in the end, the only thing that mattered was whether they believed they were going to win or not.
Right. That's sports.
And real
That's life,
quick,
right?
before we wrap this up, I want to remind people tonight at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, Inside Boxing Daily will have special guest Thomas Triber. He is a ring announcer for a lot of huge fights. He was in England for the big fight this past weekend, and I know he's worked a lot of Tyson Fury fights as a ring announcer. You can hear him tonight on Inside Boxing Daily at 11. And then tomorrow night at 11, you can hear John Responte, who was the co-author of Intimate Warfare, the best-selling book about the Mickey Ward, Arturo Gatti trilogy. Thursday night, it looks like, we got to confirm this, but it looks like Alex Ramos, former middleweight contender, one of the great amateur boxers in the history of civilization, will be on Thursday night. And then Friday night, we'll have former heavyweight turned boxing promoter Nate Tubbs on the show Friday night at 11. Nate actually knocked out Corey Sanders in 2 rounds back in 1994. Sanders would go on to win the heavyweight title, or a portion of it, against Vladimir Klitschko before Vitaly got him. So make sure you check that out. Also, Survive in Advance should be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Of course, the Sheridan Report will be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock, so make sure you note that time change. All right. I want to remind everybody, check out the Handicapping Guide, which is one of the sponsors of the show. Halfway down on the right-hand side, make sure you hit the THG button if you like to play the ponies. Seat Giant, you can get a 5% discount on all of your ticket purchases by putting in the promo code TGT. All right. Bobby, anything else before we wrap it up? Oh, I want to remind people,
Mike,
you can go on to gruelingtruth.com. And just above the THG banner, you'll see the little PayPal thing where you can click that. You can donate to the site. It's not cheap to run a site as big as what we've become. So any help we could get, we would greatly appreciate. Go ahead, Bobby. Sorry about that.
Absolutely on that one, Mike. Amen on that one. But I had a question on my Twitter DM, and you can talk about this way more as we get going, but somebody wanted to know about Keith Thurman, who's going to fight Manny Pacquiao in July. They said, ask Mike about Keith Thurman. He's favored minus 140, and should you take Pacquiao now? Do you think Pacquiao might be the favorite by the time this fight goes off July 20th?
My only concern here is this. Now, number one, Keith Thurman will be on thegruelingtruth.com on Sunday on the Ringside Boxing Show, so you can hear his interview there. I think the concern with Keith Thurman is he took a couple years off. His last fight, he did not look good against a guy he should have handled easily. Manny Pacquiao still seems to have a lot left. The only problem is you're betting on a guy that's 40 years old, which I think is one of the reasons the odds are so close. Right now, if I had to bet it, if I'm getting Manny Pacquiao in a plus 130, plus 140, I would bet that in a heartbeat. I think the fight's kind of a toss-up right now. I think Thurman was gone for 2 years because he got married to a lady who must be really nice to him, and I think made him really happy, and he just seems to have lost interest in boxing, which is why he was gone for a couple of years. I think Thurman is the younger guy. I think this fight is a complete toss-up, but if you can get Pacquiao in plus 150 or more, I would jump all over it right now, because we got to see what they look like pre-fight wise, because with boxing, that last 48 hours before the fight, the odds are going to move a lot. So if you're getting Pacquiao in plus 140 or 150 right now, I would jump on it. I just wouldn't go, as we say, balls deep on it. I would put a little bit on it, but I wouldn't put too much.
Yeah, see where it goes. Well, I had no idea you were going to have Keith Thurman on your show. I mean, that's unbelievable.
He won't be on ours. He'll be on John Raspani and Dennis Taylor. We try to split it up so we can get as many guests as we can.
I'll get you, but we'll have it. Okay, Grilling Truth will have it. Okay.
Yeah. So
is that
Sunday night around 9 o'clock, you'll be able to hear the Ringside Boxing Show with special guest Keith Thurman. I'm glad you reminded me of that because I forgot, because John just texted me the other day that Keith Thurman had agreed to be on. So if you want to check Keith Thurman out then, you can do that. And I can also tell you this, with Thomas Triber coming on tonight, he's friends with Tyson Fury. We're trying to work out something where we can get Tyson Fury on the Inside Boxing Daily Show or a Legends of Boxing show sometime here in the next month.
Hey, Mike, that's great. Okay, let's go baseball, and we'll see you tomorrow. Did you say 12 Eastern? 3 o'clock Eastern on our deal? Is that what time you want to go tomorrow?
Yes, 3 o'clock Eastern on ours.
Okay.
It's our normal time. We had some technical malfunctions with Steve Risley today. I don't know what they were, but hopefully everything's all right there. So we'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock to talk a little NBA, maybe a little Anthony Davis. He seems like he may be something that's relevant talking NBA right now. So we will be back tomorrow with that show. I want to remind everybody, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Bobby Sheridan, I'm Mike Goodpastor. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.